Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this webinar on schools and the pandemic, with the technology and mindset shift being the primary points of discussion. My name is Arunabh Singh. I'm the principal and director at Nehru World School in Ghaziabad. I'm also a father to two little daughters who are attending online classes since the lockdown started. So my personal experience has been of A, as an educator, and B, as a parent as well. It's my absolute honor and delight to be sharing this webinar space with Professor Sugata Mitra, who's a scientist, writer, and a lifelong teacher. Ms. Lissa Chazot, India's first cohort of Apple Distinguished Educator, an important member of the Mahatma Gandhi International School Ahmedabad team, and Mr. Sacchdev, who's the co-founder and CEO at Knorish, which is a platform that enables pretty much everybody to set up their own academy online. We'll be hearing from them where they come from, their experiences and their exposures on how do we really solve it, where are we right now, and where are we possibly heading. My plan is not to overstay my welcome as a moderator and have you listen to them and get to know from them how are they solving this, or how are they looking at the situation emerging for all of us. As far as I'm concerned, as an educator and also as a parent, my understanding is that this pandemic has moved things which were possibly part of our wants earlier into the need basket. And as schools, offline schools where children would come to us in the morning, and that is when we would impart education to them with the mindset of your electronic device is not welcome, only your human brain is. We moved to become places where we realized the only way we could get to our audience or our student is through that very electronic device, which wasn't welcome before the pandemic. Will this change things forever? Will this not, is something that we still have to find out. But one thing that we are realizing is that this proof of concept that technology can be used positively to engage students and get them to learn about new things, get them to explore and invent and collaborate on, that proof of concept has happened over the last 3 months, and possibly by the time we go back to the physical schools, this would have been an established fact in many schools, both private and state schools across the world. In fact, of all of my past 2 decades of experience in education, this is perhaps the first time I am witnessing educators across the world solving the exact same problem at the same time and learning from each other. Even in this webinar, we know that there have been registrations of teachers from over 60 countries, because the problem is very similar for all of us. And I think solutions also would be similar, if not the same, depending on the context that we are coming from. Without further ado, I would want to go to the panelists and hear from them what they feel they would contribute, and how their realities are. I would be making an introduction, a short introductions of these speakers before I ask them their first question, to give you a little context of the background that the speaker is coming from, and then I will ask them a question. There is a Q&A option available for the audience as well. Please feel free to ask your questions in the questions box. If it is in the chat, I won't be able to get it, but if it's in the questions box, I will try my level best to present it to the speakers today. And if you're watching us on Facebook, you actually have power over people who are joining us on Zoom, because you can share this on your screen right now. And when you do that, you would do 2 things. Educators on your Facebook would know you're concerned about your educators and you're trying to find new solutions. And parents on your Facebook wall would know teachers genuinely care and they are trying to do their level best to bring the best experience for your kids. So I'll give you 2 seconds to do that share. And before we start with Lisa, there is a question that I want to put to all of you. And if Ravi could help me bring that question up on the screen. The question very simply is, technology in education is here to stay? And the statement, do you agree that this will change what we will do in coming times? Or would you say, no, I disagree? Schools will go back to their old ways once they reopen. Okay, on a count of 5, Ravi, then I would request you to please show us the results. What does the audience feel about it? 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Can we get the results out? Let's see what people are thinking right now. Wow, okay. So 82% of us are optimistic and feel that this will change things forever. My vote went there as well. And I'm quite sure that nothing will ever shut down schools again. Just like it is right now, at best, any incident, any weather change, any political disturbance is only going to shut the school building and not the school as a whole. So with that as a basic premise, let's move on. We would first be hearing from Lisa. Lisa is an Apple Distinguished Educator and an Apple Professional Learning Specialist. She's currently working as a technology expert in Brussels. It's fairly early in the morning for her. She's previously worked at the Mahatma Gandhi International School in Ahmedabad, which we know is one of the most innovative and inclusive schools in India. At MGIS, she has worked with outcomes using technology of Google, which has been used by the Office of Chief Election Commissioner, Gujarat, municipal authorities, and several NGOs. Her initiatives so far have reached over 7.5 million people. And that's a huge impact for somebody as young as Lisa. Lisa, my first and most important question to you would be, well, technology has always been an enabler. We've experienced this perhaps since we were kids. It has been a tool to make teaching and learning process simpler. And with the pandemic, there has been this huge surge with edtech solutions coming in, and we've been spoiled for choice. In fact, I'd say that there would probably be at least 100 emails of different education technology companies giving us what they're calling their best solution, which leaves educators like me slightly confused of what should I be doing. So my question to you is, put your educator hat on and tell me that when schools and teachers are selecting these tools, what would be an appropriate tool to use and what would be the approach that you would suggest for us to select this? And as we start putting them on our shelves of learning experience, how do we balance between what we need and what we just want? Would you want to throw some light on this starting question? The next 4.5 minutes are all yours.
Yes, definitely. I would just make a small correction. The student outcomes were created with Apple technology. So I think what's interesting to note is that the needs of yesterday are not the needs of today, because according to estimates, more than 1.5 billion learners were directly impacted during the lockdown in almost close to 200 countries across the world. So the kind of discourse we had about education technology may or may not be relevant in the current times, and we need to adapt the conversation accordingly. In my opinion, education technology is a very powerful catalyst for innovation, for transformational instruction, and of course, I think that it can be a very, very positive disruption. But flooding classrooms with technology is not the answer, in my opinion. There needs to be a vision, there needs to be a mindset shift, because otherwise what's going to happen is we're just going to substitute textbooks with devices. There's not going to be the instructional change that we're hoping for, the systemic change that we're hoping for. So for the purpose of this webinar, what I've done is I've put together a 5-pronged approach so that it's easy for the listeners to retain. To start with, I would say vision is really important. Once you set out the purpose, the why, then I think all the other decisions that you need to make as a school fall into place. Because the purpose will be aligned to the local context of the school, to the individual requirements of the school, and also the resources that the school has, and the aspirations it holds. And it will enable the school to have a sense of a coherence in the tools that they opt for. Otherwise, it will be very ad hoc at best. The second suggestion I would make is that it's important to choose, instead of going, it's important, of course, in certain subjects, especially in, grade 11 and 12, to have specialized tools and resources. But as far as possible, as a school policy, try to opt for transversal and polyvalent tools, which can be used across different classes and can be aligned to different subject competencies. This also try to choose tools that are not only limited to knowledge acquisition, that they also develop skills and abilities in students. A tool like, for example, movie making would enable teachers of science, history, language to use that tool to actually create learning outcomes that can address the subject competencies of different subjects at different grade levels, for example. The third consideration I would advise schools to have is to consider the fact that students are cloistered at home right now. The conditions are very different from an environment where they would bring in technology in a classroom scenario, where they would be able to handhold students, mentor them, troubleshoot if there are some technical issues, etc. Right now, students are at home, parents are helping them, they're learning, for students who are using devices for the first time, it's a huge learning curve. So we want to be mindful of Vygotsky's proximal zone of development and what students can do with help and without help, So when you're choosing tools, you would be mindful of the curve of adoption that you're at as an individual, as a class, as a school, and ensure that, of course, it remains a challenge. You want to engage students in a challenge, but at the same time, you also want to ensure that it's achievable and it's doable for the students. Otherwise, they will disengage. Another very important consideration, in my opinion, and I think this entire wave has brought in this concern to the center stage, is access and accessibility. These two are slightly different, even though they sound similar. What I mean by access is digital access in terms of devices, in terms of internet penetration. As you know, close to 50% have internet access, which is, of course, it is a good indicator in the sense that at least 50% have access to internet, but we must be mindful of those who don't have internet access and ensure that in the modules and in the solution that we propose as a school, we ensure that we have offline modules available, asynchronous modules available for students who don't have easy access to the internet because they're in a remote village, etc. So we want to leverage the power of technology, but be mindful of those who don't necessarily have, the connecting power that it brings with it. Accessibility would be addressing special needs students, so students with special requirements, so that no one is left behind. That is a very important mandate to keep in mind when we are embracing when we're embracing any change, not only technology, in my opinion. And the fifth consideration that I would propose for schools is that when you start looking at the options available in the market today, and I get a lot of emails like you do, there will be a lot of teacher-centric resources. And I think the time for teacher-centric didactic resources, I mean, it has its place, But I think this is an opportunity for us to move away from that and opt for student-centric and interactive tools that can further learning, deepen learning, and create meaningful opportunities for teaching and learning. So these were my 5 suggestions for students, for teachers and school principals to keep in mind when they're opting for technology. As I said before, the needs of yesterday and the needs of today are no longer the same. Having said that, disaster can create conducive conditions for innovation. It has in the past. And it could possibly bolster creativity in the teachers to find solutions that are adapted to the individual needs. And I think I would really emphasize upon that, is to really ensure that you don't take a straitjacketed approach to technology adoption. You would really customize it to the needs of your students, of the environment to which you belong to. And of course, you would know that best. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lisa. I think that really puts the context and the framework quite well towards the kind of discussion that we are looking to have. Thank you very much for putting that so neutrally and not bringing an apple in the conversation. I want to go to Professor Sugata Mitra. He doesn't need an introduction, and I can see in the Q&A box the questions that have been emerging for him already. But people, I try to chop his accomplishments. There was a very, very long list, and it still is a fairly long list. And I would want to share some things that Sir has been doing in his life. Most recently, he was a professor at Newcastle, and now is back in Calcutta, where he's working on internet and children's learning once again. I first got to know of him with the hole in the wall experiment in 1999. Where he embedded a computer in Kalkaji and planted a webcam on it and showed that how minimally invasive education is possible, and children will learn if we give them the right opportunity to. Since then, he's won many awards across the world. His PhD in physics has got over 25 inventions in the area of cognitive science and education technology. In 2013, he won the TED $1 million prize, which he used to create 7 lab schools. They were called Schools in the Cloud, where he studied that learning is an emergent phenomena in the educational self-organizing system. Basically, just falling short of saying, children will learn if you give them the right environment to by themselves. There have been a tremendous impact that he's made towards education around the world. But there is an impact that he made on my personal life that he would not have known had it not been for this panel. In early 2000s, when I was trying to convince my parents to buy me a personal computer, I gave hole in the wall example to them and said, you see, if there is a device left alone to a child, the child learns. And that's the reason why you should buy me a computer. And so it worked. I did get my first computer. So I want to take this opportunity 2 decades later to thank you for that machine. So I had a question for you, but then I also noticed question that came from Shivananda CS and Jonathan Kelly from Pathways, which were very similar. And the question essentially is coming to the parents, schools and teachers. I think all of us have been guilty to varying degrees in putting marks before deep learning, where the prize or the gift is given at the end of the exam results or the day after the PTM. And even when schools work on project-based learning, there is sometimes a focus on the end product and not the learning process itself. Now, in the current context, I want to ask you, do you see a change in mindset of different stakeholders with regard to assessment? And is there a possibility of making learning more meaningful and lifelong, using this as an example? So you're still muted?
Okay, am I audible now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, welcome everybody. I noticed there are 663 people. My goodness. Well, so assessment. You know, we generally treat assessment as the last step in a learning process. So the normal sequence is that you don't know something. You, the learner, start with something that you don't know. You are taught that, meaning that somebody who knows it puts it into your head somehow. And then to check if it has actually penetrated through the skull, you're examined. And then if you do well in the exam, then the teacher is congratulated and said, you've done your job. So this sequence obviously has gotten very badly disturbed because of the pandemic. So now all the children are at home. So we have all sorts of things. I mean, we have all sorts of technologies with which you can say, well, I mean, they can learn, they can continue to learn. They don't have to just sit there doing nothing. We can give them this and we can give them that. We'll give them a computer, we'll give them this platform, and they'll learn, um, which is possible, provided, of course, they would like to do that, as opposed to, doing whatever, Facebook or TikTok. If we assume that they do want to actually use a piece of technology to learn um, how to solve an equation, uh, then presumably technology will help them. So, so the assumption that teaching has to come first, the student needs to be willing to be taught, and that examination will show us if that worked or not. This sequence cannot be followed at home, particularly the last one. You know, in country after country, the thing that has gotten postponed is the examination. We cannot examine because the children can't come here. If the children can't come here, how do we know how they're answering anything? So I have a counter question for everybody, for all the 678 people. My question is, what will happen if I take an exam, a standard good quality exam like the GCSE A level or the CBSE 12 standard? I take a few questions out of that and I send it over to some children who are at home, and I say, I'll give you an hour. Can you send me back the answers? The general assumption is that this is rubbish. I mean, they're going to ask their parents, they're going to call up their friends, they're going to look up books, they're going to check the internet, they're going to Google the answer, and they'll send you back the perfect answer. My question to you is, do you think that you will always get back the perfect answer in half an hour or whatever time you did? I would doubt that very much. Let's add to that one more thing. After the answers come back, you take a look at the answers, but before grading them, you talk to the student individually just to check how much they have comprehended of their answer. And that will be the acid test. After that, you put your grade. Okay. Why do I suggest this? You know, it's nothing new. This system has been around for years and years and years. It's at the top of our educational system, the PhD. What happens in a PhD? You start with something that nobody knows. Your supervisor doesn't know the answer, you don't know the answer. So no one can teach you anything. You're given a couple of years, and hopefully the question is interesting enough for you and your supervisor so that you are interested in spending those couple of years finding the answer. You find the answer, you write it down, and then somebody reads what you've written down, and then they sit across the table and they decide if you should be given the PhD degree. So that works fine, isn't it? You can't cheat. Can you cheat in a PhD? it doesn't really mean anything to say I cheated in my PhD. You did what? So can we bring that method down to 8-year-olds? Can we ask them a question that's interesting enough for them to look for an answer? Can we say, okay, go ahead, sit at home and do it. You want to ask your parents, go ahead. You want to ask your friends, go ahead. You want to look up books, the internet, go ahead. You've got half an hour, send me the answer. Once you get the answer, say, log on now. Let's sit across the table. So here's what your answer is. It's a beautiful answer. But tell me about it. Explain the answer to me. Then give you a grade. I think you can do excellent quality assessment, better than what we've done inside the school, outside the school. This seminar is about mindset change. That's the mindset change. Don't think of the examination as a traumatic experience of children sitting in rows and columns, silently answering questions with paper and pencil. What on earth for? When we have a problem in life, all of us pull out our phones and start Googling stuff. Why do you want the children shouldn't do that? So, there are lots of things I could do. I could go on, but I'm going to stop here to just leave this idea and to just summarize it. Start with the exam. So the child says, but nobody taught me this. And you say, well, I don't care. Here's the question anyway. You give it a shot. And you end with an interview. If the interview is even halfway good, then what you've done is you've used the assessment to complete a part of the curriculum using a pedagogy that the learner has invented for himself or herself. What can be better than that? It's a rolled up all in one. Okay, just keep that idea in your head. Let's see where we go.
Thank you for those remarks. And as you were speaking, sir, I was in my brain, I was recounting the kind of questions that teachers of my daughters and my nephews have been asking them as I listen to them attend their online classes. And I remember it was day before yesterday, my nephew asked me, can you jump? And I said, okay, fine, I can, but why? And he says, well, I have a task. We are learning to measure who can jump how much. And I gathered that the teacher in the classroom was actually teaching them measurement. And rather than trying to tell the kid, this is an inch, this is a feet, she'd given all her kids the task, jump, get other people in your house to jump and see how long, how far away are they able to jump. And in the process, the child is trying to figure out now, how do I do this measure? And because he did not have a measuring tape that long, he actually got a long ribbon to make sure that he was able to measure that. So rather than just getting kids to stick to the book and the question that are present there, it was phenomenal. And I was like, wow, this is fantastic. There was another question I saw was being asked in our school a few months back when kids were still in the school. The math teacher had written a question. The answer is 40. What's the question? And these kids in the class, there was flutter, there was discussion happening, and these kids were trying to find out maximum and the longest questions they could create using functions on, if the answer is 40, what's the question? It is 20 plus 20, it is 20 into 2, and actually the questions are endless. So thank you very much for pointing towards it is how much effort we put in designing the right question or the right inquiry for the child, rather than just an expectation from the child to design the right answer for our question. We will come back more to it. I want to quickly hop over to Mr. Sacchdev, who's the co-founder and CEO for Knorish. As a co-founder of the all-in-one EdTech software as a service platform, he's on a mission to make online learning the new norm for the next billion users. It's a very small dream, just 1 billion. But I'm hoping that you get there really, really soon. Mr. Sacchdev is also an expert in brand building, product portfolio diversification, strategic marketing, and collaboration. Knorish is also passionate about creating and executing innovative ideas at the intersection of different domains of science and business. This is the part about his briefs that I really like the most. Intersection of different domains of science and business, things that become real. He loves hacking learning curves of new fields. Current fields of interest are web applications and product design. Sir, there are questions that have come from the audience for you. Rajni Gopal and somebody named White Collar would want to know about learning in the online space. We know that the mass online open courses that your platform supports, the completion rate of those has been less than 10%. So if 100 people start these courses without a teacher actually leading them, less than 10 actually finish them. So my question to you is, do you see there is a mindset shift in this? Are the statistics around that changing? And for educators who are delivering all of their learning now in a similar manner as the mass online open courses were doing till before 3 months back, how do we get our learner that engaged, that the completion rate goes from 10% to maybe 80% or more? What would be your thoughts on that?
Thank you for the kind introduction, Arunabh. And it's such a pleasure to be on this panel with somebody like Professor Mitra. And I think he's kind of taken us in the right direction to answer this question. Let me go back to the word MOOC itself. Now, massively open online courses were designed by universities that were trying to basically teach a lot of people. In fact, they were running these experiments with millions of people trying to do online courses. But I think it's the wrong lens to look at it from. So let's go back a few hundred years and look at what Benjamin Franklin tried to do with the public library system. And I'll bring it back to the massively open online courses. But look at the idea behind it. When you read in his biography, he was saying that if you want to build a great nation, if you want to build a nation where people would work at the forefront of science, technology, in all domains, you'll have to give them access to knowledge. And the format, please mark the word format, the format of that knowledge was books. So he said, what we are going to do is we will try and build public library systems across the world, across the United States at that time. But the idea was he really saw that dream that this should be everywhere in the world if we really want civilization to progress. So when we look at that scenario of books, and I asked this question to a lot of people, and I asked them, how many books do you have at home? Most of the people say 50, 100, 500,000. And I asked them, how many have you read? Well, what's the guess? A lot of people have probably read less than 20%, 30% books. And the more your hunger for knowledge, the lesser your reading rate is going to be. And you could run this experiment. I'd be so happy to actually kind of raise it up as a question on this session. Did we ever ask what is the completion rate for a book? Because that would be pretty low too, right? Now, think about this. We always asked what is the completion rate for a MOOC because we looked at it as a mirror of the real classroom, which we shouldn't have. Now, I liked what Professor Mitra said, that if the learner is ready, if you've got somebody who's actually interested in finding the answer to that specific question, he's going to do everything and look at all formats. The format could be internet, the format could be a book, it could be a video, it could even be a movie. He'll talk to his uncles, parents. Anybody who knows the answer is the format for downloading that knowledge. So I could easily say that there are methods in UI, UX design of different platforms that are getting better now at completion rates. But I think for this session, which is actually for educators at school, this question should not be as relevant as the question, how do we identify and make sure that there is all kinds of knowledge on different formats based on the curriculum that you've decided to choose for your educational institute is available to your learners. And I think that's of more importance. Now, the completion rate, if you were to gather these students into different groups, and some groups who are avid learners would have a tremendous learning rate and would complete all kinds of courses, whereas some others who were not so interested in this typical subject will have a very low rate. So if you put online course bucket onto specific classroom courses, this number becomes relevant. But if you go back to the argument of thinking of them as books, think of the possibilities. And I have a small story to narrate here. I am father of a 3-year-old daughter. Now, she's, for some reason, I don't know why, there's this movie on Netflix called Ballerina, and she's just taken a liking to it. She would practice in front of the screen, watching the movie, trying to learn. Go back 20 years when there were no online courses or access to knowledge in this new format available. I think my daughter would have to wait for the pandemic to end to find a ballet teacher. So many things will have to fall into place for her to actually go on this journey. The first point that Professor Mitra touched upon, the desire to learn in this subject and to find the answer, exists. And that's what we spotted. On our platform, there's a ballet school that runs out of Mumbai. So all we did, switch it on the TV, and she's learning every single day. And I'm just amazed. Before I saw her, I used to talk to people and tell them, probably for a 3-year-old, 5-year-old under the class, second or third, online learning is not going to work. But I don't say that anymore. And I think she's taught me that, if the desire is there to find that answer, just put the content in any format in front of people and the completion rates would be amazing. I think we'll have to find new ways to measure them. In fact, there are no ways that exist at the moment. So thank you.
Thank you very much for bringing in that that perspective in. And I do agree that we shouldn't be comparing the current system in itself. It has to be where were we before this and what were the efficacies of our success with the previous system. And there certainly is a lot of learning coming. I'm going to probe you further on that question in just a little bit. There is a question I want to go back to Professor Mitra. Supriti Chauhan and Ashwini Adhikari have presented parts of these questions on the Q&A platform, sir. So in your the granny cloud model where you would put in teachers in front of students, you had based the entire work on self-organized learning environments. And you've said that this actually works. And if it did, then it has huge relevance in the times right now where all the teachers are needing to do learning through these online classes. So the question really to you is, what would be your advice to the parents and elders alike with regards to these self-organized learning environments? And also to schools who are imagining that when kids even come back into schools and the government says half the kids would come in, 1/3 the kids would come in, or there would be parents who would say, fine, the school is open, but I still don't feel it is safe for my child to go in. So what can we do as caregivers for our learners to continue this learning in the online space going forward?
Sure. Well, self-organized learning environments have been around now for actually over 10 years, because I think I did the very first ones in England in 2008, 2009, in a tiny little primary school in Gateshead. And then it spread out of there and went sort of all over the world. And teachers have been using SOLs, as they're called, self-organized learning environments, all over the world in their own way. Some have made modifications and so on. The basic principle is you ask a question and then you allow a group of children, very important that you should have a group, usually 4, 6, 8, whatever, accessing the internet, discussing the question and evolving a collective answer. Okay, that seems to work better because it's a bit like play, when you solve a problem together as opposed to solving it alone. The thing about human beings is that we are a little afraid of being held accountable for mistakes if we've done things alone. But if we have done things in a group, then, children in particular will try a lot of adventurous stuff because they know that if you say, who did that? They'll say, no, I didn't do it. I mean, all of us did it. So a group is safe. So anyway, so you ask the question, allow the group to discuss, and then you come back with an answer. This is as simple as it is. If you don't have someone to make up a good question, if you're in a remote area and there really isn't someone to make a good conceptual question, you can use the granny cloud. The granny cloud, they're basically experienced educators, retired educators. They're very nice people. And they don't teach. They just come in, they talk to the children. How are you? Let me, tell me a poem. What's going on outside? Oh, what's the monsoon? Oh, that's right. Is that only in India or is it somewhere else? And the children say, oh, well, in India, no, somewhere else. And then the cloud granny says, I'll tell you what, I'll come back in an hour. You tell me about the monsoon. That's all. It's as simple as that. But what I'm doing today, and I haven't done this before, so I'm kind of interested in the reaction, is that I'm just trying to say, isn't this actually an assessment, an exam? The soul actually is not a lesson. It's an exam, it's an assessment. It's an assessment of a subject that the learner does not know. Sometimes it is a subject which even the teacher does not know. I mean, like if you're a teacher from England talking to some children in India, you're asking them about the monsoon, you probably know as little about the monsoon as they do. So then what kind of an exam is it? Well, when the answer comes back, you evaluate the answer and you talk to the children to see if they have comprehended what they're saying. And at the risk of repeating myself, isn't that what we do in a PhD? When we evaluate a PhD, isn't that how we evaluate? We just try to see, is this guy talking sense? So, all I'm saying is, what would happen if we brought that system down from the PhD into the school, okay? And drive it not with simple, stupid questions that you can Google in 2 seconds, because if the child is sitting at home, he'll send you an answer back in 2 seconds. So ask them the big questions. Ask them the questions to which no one knows the answer. Because if no one knows the answer, the internet doesn't know either. So that is the kind of thing that you should do. So what should you do as a parent? Well, take whatever is your current adult problem, is it possible to get vegetables and some rice quickly online because we are all locked down, and apparently this is a containment area. Say that to a couple of 8-year-olds, and they'll look at you with their mouths open and say, what? And you say, yeah, that's what I want you to do. Can you tell me, because I can't understand a word of any of this, but can we get that vegetables and rice or not? Now watch. I have watched it for 20 years. You get your vegetables in 1 hour flat. So that's the generation we're dealing with. And in the process of solving the problem, they will learn. It's the upside down system. Examination, learning, no teaching at the end at all, most of the time.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thanks.
And as you're speaking, it's just resonating with a lot of parenting conversation that we're having as well. So this discussion is not just a discussion of how do teachers do this. I think it's also a discussion of how do parents engage with their children as learners and keep that curiosity and willingness to ask that good question alive, and having the courage to say, it is okay, I don't know the answer to it. And thank you for bringing that in the front of this conversation as well, sir. I want to move to Lisa. Lisa, there are 2 questions that are coming to you. One is from Neha Sharma from GD Goenka, and also from SR Tirisia Kuti. I'm really sorry for the bad pronunciation of the name, but they're actually asking you questions with regards to, we woke up, there was lockdown, and teachers were expected to and also delivered on the promise of, now my class happens online. We opened our homes, we opened our lives to our learners, and there we were the next day or the next week or the next month, and we were now starting to do these classes online. We've been able to onboard students. We've also been able to keep their attention alive, their engagement alive so far. But the question that we now have is, what is your advice for them going forward? How do they make sure that this engagement stays on and they're able to get that young mind to concentrate on that inquiry that they're talking about? And also, do you see this pandemic actually revolutionizing the pedagogy that we have happening in the classroom, and the much needed blended form of technology that we've been speaking about in the schools? Are we closer to it now? Will it stay? And if it will, then how will we do it? You're still muted, Lida.
Thank you for the question. First of all, I'd like to just echo some of the points that were mentioned by the panelists. I think it's important to be curious, and I think that's important for teachers and for learners. And because we don't have answers, clear-cut answers laid out in front of us, it's really an opportunity for us to explore together, to develop skills and competencies together. And what's going to happen is that there's going to be pockets of change, pockets of excellence that will emerge across the country. And I would love to hear stories, your stories of transformation in the classroom as it is specific to your environment. And going forward, I think what would be interesting is to bring these pockets of change together and to initiate a dialogue between them, between you, so that we can learn from each other and take it to the next level. So I think when we embrace change, it can be a very lonely process. We can feel that we're an island, we're doing things on our own. The challenging can be, can feel very daunting. And to create a sense of a support mechanism, whether it's, with known people or with, the larger community of teachers, because we're all in this together. We've literally been thrown into this together with little or no learning curve. Normally, this would be accompanied by a strategic plan, by professional development, etc., etc. As there's this joke that goes, who has decided the digital transformation policy of your school? Is it the CEO, the CTO, or COVID? And usually, in the joke, it's COVID, which is ticked off. So for many people, it's literally been something that they've not been prepared for, and they have been thrown into the deep end of the sea, literally. And so what's important is to know that reach out for support, connect with one another so that you have a sense of community and a sense of solidarity, and you draw strength from that as you move forward. Another thing that's important to keep in mind is that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. There are resources out there available for you to tap into. The one that's coming to mind right now is, for example, this repository of resources that have been curated by the United Nations. It's a report called, I have the title in front of me, so I'll read it, Supporting the Continuation of Teaching and Learning During the COVID Pandemic by OECD. So they had, they sent out a survey. It was filled in by participants across the world. And then the responses were analyzed by Harvard graduates and alumni. And it was put together as a report, which allows you to literally just have a list of curated resources that you can choose from. Leading organizations, leading publishing groups have put out their resources out into the open as OER, open educational resources during the pandemic. You can, use these resources. Big actors like Apple and Google have curated resources. I know that Apple has, in fact, I will, if you want, I can mention it later on. So what you need to know is that you're not alone in this process. We're all in it together. So reach out for support. Another thing to keep in mind is also that technology adoption is a journey, okay? Dr. Ruben Podentara has developed this model called the SAMR model. So the first step in that adoption process is literally substitution, which means that instead of a textbook, you have an ebook. Instead of your whiteboard, you have a screen. Instead of teaching in front of students, you're teaching in front of a camera. So the first step, he says, is that it's just a substitution, and that is part of the onboarding process and technology adoption. There's nothing, there's no reservation to have regarding that. But we need to have a vision about where we want to go, which is, redefining the way we operate in the classroom. We need not, what's important is not to be happy with substitution as a level of technology adoption and feel that we've achieved it, this is it, we have brought technology into our classrooms. No, we need to be hungry for more and strive for better. In his model, he talks about redefining instruction altogether. That's the last step of his model, where you are able to do things with technology that you were not able to do before, like creating an ebook, creating a movie, a radio show. So let me link it to the curriculum so that it's a little more coherent for you and it resonates with you. You can create a radio show between two historical characters. You can create an ebook about scientific concepts, but from a first-person perspective. You can create a movie following the journey of a metal, or about life during the confinement and how certain scientific principles were applied in the house. So really, the sky is the limit in terms of creativity and innovation of teachers engaging with technology. Really, I have, as part of Apple, I'm part of this, community of teachers who are individually doing things using technology, and each one is very different. That is really something to know, that there is no one benchmark. There are ideals and there are aspirations towards which we can strive towards, but everyone is going to be different, and they're going to bring in their own individuality and they're going to address their own needs, and that is what is really important to keep in mind. Another thing I would highlight when you are for teachers is that strive for creativity. This is really literally a blank canvas that we have. It's not every day that we get such a situation. It's a very challenging situation. It has it can be very daunting, but it is also a blank canvas in some ways. So this is an opportunity to strive for, according to the Bloom's taxonomy, creativity is at the apex of the learning curve. So over to you. You wanted to say something?
Right. Well, I wanted to add there that I'm sure that there is some sort of like a document that you would have been able to put together already with the work that you are doing. And if it's okay, could we share that to the audience once we send the thank you emails, if you've got the document that you were referring to as well, because one thing is for sure in current times, that information is aplenty, and people across the world are ready to share their resources. And like you said, this is really not the time when I want to have 100% of new ideas. I should also be looking for ideas that have worked in other contexts, and I could contextualize them for my learning. Lisa, I would reach out to you after the webinar and possibly seek some of those documents that we can then share with people to give them slightly more hand-holding. So thank you for bringing that up. I want to go back to Sacchdev from Knorish. Sir, there are two questions that are coming from P. Bora Bora and Hemlata Mehta. And they're essentially talking about the situation where now offline tutoring is non-existent and will possibly stay non-existent for a while. And the days of online tutoring are here, not just in India, across the subcontinent, or perhaps across the world. So what platforms are available for educators in India to set up their own academies online for them to be able to do this independently by themselves? Another question is the Indian consumer, according to you, ready to spend money on something which is available on the internet? Because earlier we used to think all the information available on the internet is free. It's only now that we are starting to realize, no, this actually costs some money as well for the person who's making it. And if you could give us a slight background on Knorish, and how does it get us to do live classes, that is synchronous learning, and asynchronous learning, so that somebody who doesn't have 24 hours access to technology can possibly go back and look at these things. I am mindful of the time. We've only got about 5-10 minutes left in the discussion, so let's keep the thing going. Right, all yours, sir.
Sure. Thank you for that question, Arunabh. I would like to begin with talking about the online learning, how it is now becoming inevitable. And I think there could not be a better example than this session. Now, because of ScooNews and you kind of hosting this session, I think this is revolutionary, nothing short of revolutionary. I personally, if I had the choice of doing exactly the same thing pre the pandemic days, just look at how much time we have saved. I can give full attention sitting at my office or my own personal space. So I think the first thing we'll have to do is to break it down and understand that there is very little difference between online and offline. Why we keep going back to it is because we've grown up in a world where this was not normal. This is a change that we are seeing right now. And if I really were to build an efficacy point list on, is this good? This would be brilliant, because I have got as much benefit as I would have if you were sitting, we were all sitting on a dais, you were sitting in front of me. I think I've learned as much from this. So coming back to the question, in India, which has always been a land of gurus, this is going to be a hotbed for producing content for the world. There'll be so many opportunities where access to content creation, which has been made so easy by these powerful devices that we all carry. And we've, in the past few days, we have done sessions on how this can happen, how these devices can produce world-class content. And I really mean it. We have seen people sitting in remote corners of the country being able to get onto these devices, do synchronous learning, asynchronous learning, build content for all kinds of subjects. So I think there couldn't be a better time. And when I go to the next part of your question where you asked, would they pay for it? Again, breakdown between online and offline, there isn't any difference right now. So would we pay for a real physics tuition or a dance class? We've always paid, right? We've always paid for those. So once we have tasted this, we understand, and we will start looking at every skill, dissect it into chunks, and understand that not every skill needs to, for us to be in the same room. It does not need physical proximity. Not everything needs to be taught in that way. So I think once you look at it that way, you'll understand that there's no question about paying. Indians are already paying for tons of content. And as a matter of fact, some of the most valuable education technology companies globally are based out of India now. And I'm not just talking about one or two companies here. If you really did the math, I think this would become one of the largest and the best place in the world to build an edtech company, because we have such a large population that's hungry for knowledge. Traditionally, our homes would invest first in the education of a child, and then probably their house and their necessities would always take a backseat over education too. So I believe it's now, I mean, it's happening, the payment and people buying courses. Coming to the point of view of how our platform kind of enables this is, we have built an ecosystem and a platform where we have broken this problem down into pieces. So we understood that we did not want to make a marketplace where schools or educational institutions would not be able to cater to their own students. We understood that a lot of these institutions just want to use technology for their own consumption, build their maybe a good app or a website, start listing their asynchronous, synchronous courses there, organize their classes into sessions, go beyond academics at time, be able to assess as well, do live classes pretty much the way we are doing now. So we built all of these pieces on the Knorish platform, and we've worked a lot on good user interface and user experience. Now, where we come from, there is a belief that the best user experience is something that is invisible. So if you have to learn, spend time on understanding, okay, how do I basically create a lecture here? How do I invite my students? How do I invite them to talk to each other? How do I bring my teachers to conduct these classes? all of that has to be broken down in such a way that it becomes invisible. And I mean, Lisa being here, Apple actually did that best. They broke down the barrier of interface between the iPhone user and the iPhone, and that's why it was such a massive success. So this thought process actually led us to look at this entire problem of building a platform where we would do customized individual platforms for every school, institution, content creator to be able to go live and teach. And this brings another opportunity, which I can't leave without quickly mentioning about. Now, if you really look at the access problem, I used to ask this question to a lot of my friends who were leading schools. They either were founders or principals. And I would ask them, these students would like to learn from maybe a NASA scientist, maybe a mathematician or a physicist. Why don't you get those people to teach them on a day-to-day basis? A lot of them would not even want to charge because they want to give back to the world. It wasn't possible because of the entire structure of the school, the access problem, the distances, the remote, the remote accessibility of so many places. And that is happening now. I mean, this is such a possibility. And I think we'll only realize this in the next few years, how powerful this could be. Imagine learning filmmaking, as Lisa mentioned, directly from Steven Spielberg. Was that possible earlier? No, I think a lot of people would have barriers, but now they'll actually try. So they'll learn it directly from Spielberg, and imagine the kind of production they'll do post that. So I think we are in that world. We are building a platform that will enable that. And I think this is a brilliant opportunity. I mean, I really get so excited. If I was in front of you, you'll see me jumping, but this is a brilliant time. I think we've never had such an opportunity ever.
I want to give you a follow-up question before I go to Professor for the last question, as we are pretty much running out of time here. I want to ask you specifically, you having experienced and curated so many online courses that have been developed. If you had to give a snapshot to people who are listening to us, who are imagining themselves creating these online courses for themselves and monetizing it in their own spaces, what would be the top 3 tips that you would give to someone who's looking at creating a course and delivering it online?
Okay, so first of all, find that niche. That's tip number 1. You'll have to really go with the niche. Sometimes you're a physics teacher or a dance teacher, but I think you'll have to really carefully select what you want to go and teach on. And I come from this, not just from an educational institution standpoint. There are a lot of people who have so many great skills unlocked and available to them that they could really teach that. So identify that well. And at the same time, have a learner's mindset. It isn't a rocket science. So platform like ours basically make it really easy for you to be able to produce content. But at the same time, you just need to be ready to learn a few different fine-tuning domains of, let's say, shooting a simple course, or let's say producing a decent looking PowerPoint, or maybe coming in front of the camera like this and just relaying your lecture to a few hundred students, or even a few, let's say 10 or 20 students. So I think being a learner, you'll have to start there, finding a good niche, learn your devices and technology a little bit, and they are getting better and better every day. I asked this question to a filmmaker last week on one of the sessions, and he said, it doesn't matter if your device is 5,000 rupee or a 10,000 rupee mobile phone, they're all brilliant now to produce content that looks as good as a, let's say, even a movie production 10 years ago. So learn just a little bit of that. There is plenty out there. The best part of today's time is everybody's giving so much of free content out that you could hack this in under a day. The third step would be learn how to get your word out. You'll have to really give people a taste of what you're teaching. So in the third step, after you produce the content, be there on social media channels. I mean, talk to people, tell them that this is how it's going to benefit them, and learn maybe a little bit of posting on Facebook, Twitter, other platforms that are available free of cost. So I think those are the 3 most important steps.
Thank you very much for bringing that up. And I think as educators, I would want to thank you for kind of democratizing the entire process and making individual people skilled and enabled to offer their content and their knowledge online. Professor, I want to come to you. This would perhaps be the last question, as I'm aware that we're already overshooting by 4 minutes, but it's a very important question. This question comes often in webinars that I have moderated, but often people don't have an answer for this. the question primarily is coming from the equity and the divide of access that exists, not just in India, but across the world in different countries. So as a professor who has actually worked with people who did not have access, and having spent considerable amount of your life in trying to solve that problem, what would be that one advice you would have for teachers who are dealing with children who either don't have access to technology themselves or don't have access to data, or teachers who themselves have got shared devices and are not able to do live classes? So what's your advice to them? That is one big question that Praveen Bhope has been asking. And another question I want to add to that by Kakoli Pal. She has been trying to ask that how do you weave subjects like music and art and languages into active learning strategies and make them come alive over an online platform? All yours, sir.
Okay. Both nice questions. I'll take the second one first because that's a really quick answer. I mean, there are many ways in which you can integrate things like art or music into this kind of active learning situation. What I would suggest is that instead of my trying to list it here when we don't have time, is that you do a search on self-organized methods for learning music, for learning art, or whatever it is. And chances are that you will hit several people who have written about it. Since I have the floor over here, you could try my book. I have a book called The School in the Cloud, which specifically talks about several of these points. Anyhow, so now, but coming to this other question, which I hear of very, very often, what about the people who don't have access? Now, as you just heard, 50% have access. 1 in every 2 human beings on this planet has access. You could either talk about the one which doesn't have access, or you could feel proud about the one who does have access. There are 7 billion people on this planet. 1 out of 2 means 3.5 billion people have access. So first thing I will say is that you cannot say until everybody has access, we won't use technology. That's rubbish. Okay? We will use technology because there are lots of people who have access to technology. The second thing, very specifically about India, as you mentioned, I've been inside villages and the remote areas of India looking at these problems for many, many years now, 20 years. I've been inside rural England. I've been inside rural Canada, rural United States, Brazil, Argentina. And everywhere you hear this. Oh, but you know, inside, deep inside, we don't have the internet. I go deep inside. What do I see? 9 times out of 10. Men sitting around outside bars on the footpath with mobile phones. Men, I will repeat. It's the same in India. You go up there, and what do you think they're doing with their mobile phones? 3G, 2G, 4G. Yes? You go to their homes. Does your child have access? No, we're poor people. We don't have any access to the internet. That father will not give his phone to his children. I'm sorry to end on a sour note, but that's the reality. Up in the Himachal, in the mountains, somebody wrote to me, "Oh, sir, we don't have any internet. How will we do self-organized?" I said, do the young men have internet? Yes, sir, everybody, all the fathers have internet. So why don't you give them, ask them to give their phones to the children for 1 hour every day? No, sir, they won't. Okay? Solve that problem. It has nothing to do with technology.
So before you end, I want to ask you on the last thing that you were speaking about on the screen time. Is there a scientific way to know what is the right amount of screen time for the human eye?
No, I've been trying to trace work on this, and again, my answer is actually that we shouldn't worry too much about it. You know, when I was a child, my grandmother used to say, "Don't read too much; you'll spoil your eyes." When my son was a child, his grandmother used to say, "Don't watch television too much; it will spoil your eyes." And now we're telling the children, "Don't watch those screens because it will spoil your eyes." Nothing spoiled our eyes, or let's put it this way: all our eyes are gone anyway.
Right.
Okay, our eyes were designed to look for animals in the distance. Instead of that, we're peering at 6-inch focus, but we'll get used to that. Don't worry about it. Keep the intensity down. Don't keep it at high intensity, the same as earphones. Don't keep it at high volume. There are simple things like that. But as far as how many hours a day, well, not because of the eyes, but if you're spending all those hours in the day looking at the screen instead of doing a couple of other things, for example, instead of feeding the dog, instead of going out for a walk, then you're damaging not your eyes, but your mind. And that's a risk you don't want to take.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for bringing that up. You know, it was only yesterday my daughter, who's 4, asked me, "Papa, do you wear spectacles because you used to see a lot of iPad?" And I'm trying to tell her, "No, darling, when I was a child, there was no iPad."
Arunabh, I would like to just quickly add something here. So there is a blue light filter on every mobile now. It's a compulsion for the creators of the mobile devices to put in. So that blue light filter is being scientifically found to reduce the strain on the eye. And I second thoughts of Professor Mitra about if we let them watch it too much. There is a great research on that from Mihai Csikszentmihalyi of the Flow, who's written the book Flow, and Deep Work by Cal Newport, where they say if you've given too many fragmented pieces of information or let's say entertainment to a human mind, their ability to focus on deep thoughts or deep work or focus on tasks that require unwavering attention keeps going down and down. So you have to train your mind back up to constantly learn for a while. So I think that's the danger we're fighting with here. But the book Deep Work by Cal Newport is a brilliant piece of work on that side.
Thank you for sharing that.
Can I add one small quote by Gandhiji?
Go ahead, Lisa.
Yeah, I really think that this quote is relevant, especially in these uncertain times. So I'm going to read it aloud to everyone. It's all very well to acquire a stock of knowledge from good books or from other sources, in this case, technology. But the more important thing is to learn humanity. The primary function of teachers is therefore not to teach the alphabet, but to inculcate humanity. And I think it's really important not to forget this when we are striving for the right tools, whether it's technology or other tools, is to use this time to be compassionate, to bond. This is really what my colleagues at MGIS mentioned, that they use technology to really bond with parents, address their anxieties, bond with students, address their fears about these uncertain times. And so leverage technology also to create these human connections, that go beyond the screen. Earlier it was beyond the walls of the classroom, now it's beyond the screens. And don't forget the different languages. When we speak about access, it's also about different languages, and ensure that it's accessible to people with because we have a heritage of different languages. And as a gift, I'd like to just offer this, since some of you mentioned in the chat that you wanted the resources. I'm happy to share the resource, the ones that I mentioned, and also the list of curated Apple resources, Apple for Education. And these are the free ones. I will choose the free ones for you. I'll curate them. And if you have any questions, Arunabh and Ravi can select any 3 questions. I'm happy to address them via Twitter and so that the conversation can go on beyond this webinar.
Thank you very much, Lisa. And thank you for your closing remarks as well. I want to go back to Professor Mitra once again. So would you have closing remarks for today's session?
Yes, I mean, firstly, I think it was a useful session from what I can see in the chat. A lot of people enjoyed themselves. We discussed, I think, all the salient points. It's just that towards the end, I think we went a little bit off track. And since I have the floor as the last speaker, I will take full advantage of it. Firstly, this whole thing about, multiple inputs coming out of the screen, preventing children from doing deep learning assumes that 19th century deep learning is more desirable than any other kind of learning. Okay, there's a built-in assumption there. We want our children to be like us. Okay, what if being able to handle multiple inputs simultaneously is more important than deep learning in the times that they're living in? Oh no, that's not allowed because I can't do that. And if I can't do that, how dare the children try to do it? So it's wrong. You should question that. The second thing about, connecting with each other, the values of the past, the glorious values of our past. Well, what can I say? Just go back 2,500 years. There are two people who talked about that. There is Socrates and there is the Buddha. And both of them said, yes, look at the past, examine it, and then chuck it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Mr. Sacchdev, would you have closing remarks?
I think this has been excellent. There's so much of learning for all of us here. And I can see from the comments, people have learned a lot. So I agree that we'll have to build new methods and new pathways here. And we'll all have to, the way forward is all have to keep a learner's mind at best. And I think that would be my closing remark is as educators, as students, as parents, there are new paradigms being built. There are new delivery methods, formats, so many new domains that will open up. And as they say, our children are going to be in jobs that don't even, the fields don't even exist now. So my take on this would be that not just the children, I think we'll have to open up our thought process towards lifelong learning again. And constantly be at the edge of trying to improve ourselves, because there's so much that we'll have to learn as all of these roles. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Very aptly said as well. Before we close, I want to bring in Ravi Santalani. He stays behind the system and creates these fantastic opportunities for all of us. Ravi, I wanted to thank you for creating this, and I request you to give the word of thanks as well.
Well, thank you, Arunabh, for so kindly agreeing to moderate this session. I've been saying this in all my conferences, physical ones. Unfortunately, you couldn't have one this year. And you are the best moderator that India has got. And I'm sure, a lot of people that would second me there. And thank you, Doc, for taking this time and not, never saying no to me. Doc, I've asked you a couple of times and you always, agreed. Thank you very much for the honor, that you always bestow upon me. Lisa, wonderful meeting you online. And I look forward to see you when I start my road trip from Jaipur to London. And I look forward to meet you in Brussels next year somewhere.
Absolutely.
June 7th,
Welcome.
the 50th day of my road trip. So let's hope so. It happens. Kinner, I haven't endorsed any platform, that easily, but I'm a great fan of Knorish. And I thank Ninad Karpe, who introduced me to you. And I think, it's a very, very promising platform. And I so look forward to, in fact, not suggest people to have a look at it. I'd rather go to a level telling people that, our upcoming master classes might be hosted by Knorish. So I think it's a brilliant platform, and it takes a lot for people to get me to endorse something. But I think this is something which is coming organically. And since we have already overshot the time, I would still take that liberty to ask you all one simple question. That is something which has been troubling me since quite some time now. Your quick inputs, I'll start with Doc, I'll go to Lisa, I'll then come to Kinner, and I'll let Arunabh answer at the last. What are your thoughts on the online ban on, the ban on the online learning? I mean, that a few governments in India, like Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh, and Karnataka, they've literally banned the online learning for students up till grade 5th and 7th. Doc, what are your thoughts on that?
So there are sorry, please, Professor Mitra, please go ahead.
Well, firstly, I don't have enough information. I mean, I don't know why they've stopped it. There may be reasons which have not much to do with teaching and learning, but more to do with business. So I don't know what are the pressures of the private tutors, what are the other kinds of pressures that makes people do this. The ostensible reason was that some children don't have access, and as I explained a little while ago, most of the time that is nonsense.
Perfect. Lisa, what are your thoughts on that?
I think there are definitely reservations. As I said, there are challenges associated with any education technology adoption process. I personally have no comment because this is a political decision in that sense. But for schools that have reservations, I would say that definitely in the younger years, it's important to ensure that you have a blended approach learning in case you do opt for technology, because the needs of students are definitely different, and you need to ensure that you address those needs, the sensory motor needs, the time away, activities with hands-on tools, etc. So although we are focused on technology thematic right now, it's important to keep that in mind when we're talking about the overarching vision, to ensure that it doesn't lopside onto the other side of technology where we're only using technology, but it needs to be a balanced approach. So no technology, only technology. I think both of these are not the answer. Really, the answer is in the middle. But of course, that remains at the discretion of the teachers and the adults who are going to orient and guide the students under their care.
Perfect. Kinner, a short answer from you, and then Arunabh, you could kind of close this session with your thank you remarks.
So again, I don't have too much information, or I don't know much about why the ban has been there. But globally, it has been studied that bans on things that a lot of people use positively have never been so effective. So I really can't comment on why this has happened. But according to me, I think in this information age where most of the stuff comes from internet and everybody has access to these mobile devices, I think we'll have to constantly give them avenues to learn. All kids will have to have that. If we don't curate, or the schools and their elders and parents don't curate information and knowledge for them, the screen time on things like YouTube Kids or other television-based shows will carry on, because that's inevitable, locked in homes, and they'll have to find activities to be conducted. So I would be of the thought that that avenue will have to be nurtured and built further.
Thank you, Kinner. Thank you. And over to you, Arunabh. And thank you, everyone, for joining in. And to you, gentlemen. Unmute, Arunabh, if you can.
My answer to that is not very different to what my esteemed colleagues have said here. And I would agree with Mr. Trilok Singh Bisht, who just mentioned that this is clearly a block mindset from the government. So I wouldn't hold myself back and say, maybe there is something good about it. No, I don't think there is anything good about it. This was a call that was made in haste. And I've seen that state governments have corrected themselves, and they have brought back the sanctions that they had put in. And for all of us as educators, as parents, as caregivers, we need to understand that online platform is a platform. It's a tool. What you do with the tool is defining if it is good for you, if it is bad for you. This is the same as saying we are not going to allow people to bring matchboxes into their homes, because if they do, they will light their houses on fire. So what you do with fire, do you make food and keep yourself warm in the winter, or do you light it up? So it's a tool. as policymakers, we need to understand this. We want to give guidelines. We want to share good practices. We want to do all of that. And like Professor Mitra said, yes, there are portions of the population in a country where this access is not there. But are we going to wait till the last person gets it? Or are we going to use every possible method available to us to get this access across to them? I know NCERT is working on 12, 24-hour channels, and they're curating content for it. So it is a lot of work in progress. We, as a country, need to understand that we should be doing everything that we can for whoever we can do it for, and not wait just for the last person to get it. There has been a lot of movement on this thought to try and convince the government to think otherwise. There is this hashtag that has gone viral. I think it was the 7th most trending hashtag on Twitter last week, which was hashtag right to learn. And all the educators who are present on the screen who believe that educators in the country need to have this choice of how will I reach my student, do tag this hashtag right to learn and get your voices heard. We are using a platform, and that is what it is. It is nothing more, nothing less. It's a platform to get thought across from one human brain to another and to get the other human brain to think. To all the people who have been listening in, and for people who still stayed on with us 26 minutes post the time we were supposed to finish, many thanks for coming and joining us at this time. We understand some of you probably also have their schools running. We will continue to come back in different formats and engage with each other and share learnings that happen from one to the other as well. I want to take this opportunity of thanking ScooNews, Ravi and Vinerji, who've been making this possible and in many ways democratizing education and availability of resources. You know, I had talked about professors from MIT and IIT. We've got an example of Professor Sugata Mitra. No other way would have I ever thought I would get to have a conversation with somebody who spent their entire life serving humanity and trying to figure out new questions and new answers. So thank you very much for today, and hope to see you again very soon. Have a glorious day. Thank you.
Thank you, and namaste.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.